I want to welcome you to this short virtual seminar of energy management and emotional resilience. It's a watered down version of a larger workshop that I would normally do. Usually, this would be no less than an hour and a half because it's a pretty deep subject. So, while it may seem deep for some people because this is a new subject for some, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So keep that in mind. If you go through this and you have a lot of questions about things, that's probably a good sign. And that means that you are developing a new level of awareness and insight into information that is not commonly presented in regards to solving for our problems, such as energy management and resilience. All right, so here are a few things that we're going to cover in this session. We're going to talk about how to balance energy by identifying energy drainers and renewers across 4 domains of resilience. You'll also gain a foundational understanding of awareness and the key role that it plays in resilience and our energy and overall well-being and fulfillment in life. You're going to learn simple and effective exercises to boost your energy and manage stressors. And you're going to learn how to approach, avoid, and handle triggers that may lead to energy drain and emotional reaction. And there will be a document that you can download, actually, 2 documents that you can download, one of which has an overview of all that we went over in regards to resilience domains, some exercises that you can practice, and there's also going to be an activities sheet. So I would go ahead and find those downloads in the video because you will want to reference them as we work through some of this stuff together. I love this quote by Albert Einstein, and that is everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you can't help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. The reason I love this quote is because so many people, when we talk about energy, while yes, it is a science, a lot of people, when they hear it in regards to emotions and our energy as human beings, they automatically think that it's woo woo and just pseudoscience so far out there. And it may seem that way to some of us because we're not used to talking about energy and how emotions carry that energy. Right now, I want to welcome you in joining me on an exploration of deep introspection. I'm not sure if you've ever went on a trek before, but prior to embarking on a trip, you'll want to be well prepared for what is to come. It's essential and in your best interest to familiarize yourself with the path that you've chosen to take, the possible dangers that you may face along the way, the sights that you want to see, and then you'll want to assess the risk and rewards of all of your choices. The preparation that is done before you leave will determine how challenging or enjoyable your journey will be, how soon you'll get there, and in some cases, if you make it to your destination at all. Currently, we are all in the midst of a journey together, and that's called life. And it's a journey that many of us weren't fully prepared for. Metaphorically speaking, many of us, if not all of us at some point, have been blindsided by landslides that have blocked our path, earthquakes that have shaken us at our very core, and monumental storms that we find ourselves questioning if we can even weather. So today, I'm offering to be your guide and provide you with the insight and resources that you need, not only to have the energy and resilience to navigate your journey more smoothly, but to appreciate life even when it gets challenging. I'm assuming if you are watching this video that you are experiencing energy drain and unpleasant emotions and difficulty overcoming some of these challenges. And what you're experiencing right now in regards to that, I've also experienced and I've overcame. So I'm going to take just a moment to share part of that story with you. At the age of 15, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and later in my 20s, OCD and ADD. That's obsessive compulsive disorder and attention deficit disorder. And I suffered from routine panic attacks, emotional meltdowns, low self esteem, emotional dependency, and a need to have constant control over my environment and other people. Long story short, through introspection, awareness, and developing my emotional intelligence, I've successfully reversed all of my diagnosed conditions and haven't needed medication in over 7 years. My relationships, energy, performance, self worth, every facet of my life has been transformed by this deeper level awareness, which I will share with you today. At least some of it, an hour, even 30 minutes, whatever time this takes, is not enough to cover everything. I could spend days and weeks on this topic. It is a very robust topic. But let's go ahead and dive in and see what we can do with the time that we have. So let's start by identifying what drains our energy. So in the top left quadrant, what I want you to do is list what you believe to be your top 5 energy drainers or emotional triggers. So list what you believe to be your top 5 personal energy drainers or emotional triggers. So a few examples of energy drainers or triggers might be heavy traffic, a screaming child, a particular task, or maybe a thought could be a trigger or energy drainer for you. Anything that puts you in a foul mood and drains your energy would fit into this quadrant. The more specific you are, the better. For instance, if you put work as an energy drainer, that is a very, very, very broad topic. So, what specifically about work triggers or drains you? And there may be a number of things. There could be 30 or 40 things that trigger you at work, but choose your top ones that you want to focus on for this exercise. So, if you have a top trigger for work, then put that one. If you have something in your personal life that's a big trigger, think of the top 5 triggers for you throughout your day. Now, below that quadrant in the bottom left, I want you to list 5 personal energy renewers. What gives you energy? Again, be specific. For example, if you put self care, what specifically are you doing for self care? And only write down the things that you're currently doing. So if you say, oh man, a massage would be amazing for self care, well, if you're not going to get massages, then don't write that down. If you think, oh, meditation or a walk would be great every day for self care, if you're not doing it, don't write it down. It's very important. So, as you're doing these exercises, feel free to pause the video because I'm going to keep going. And so, by pausing it, it'll give you enough time to finish what you're doing. And then I'm going to pick up right there where you left off. Okay. As we continue to move through this exercise, you'll begin to notice that the things that you've identified as your drainers and triggers may not actually be the source of your energy drain. And your ability to recognize this, that being that the things that you thought were your drainers are not your drainers, means that you're developing a deeper level of awareness and understanding, which will help you to effectively manage and potentially eliminate some of your energy drainers altogether. Now we're going to identify which domains of resilience these energy drainers are impacting. So there's 4 primary resilience domains: emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. And while all of these domains interact with one another, some energy drainers will impact 1 or 2 domains more heavily than others. For example, if you're working on a difficult problem like an algorithm, which domain do you think would primarily be impacted by that? Mental, right? What about if you're having difficulties with your relationship? That could be emotional, potentially spiritual. Yes? So let's talk about the whole spiritual component for a second, because this one confuses some people. Some people may say, well, I'm not religious, so that spiritual component does not apply to me. Spirituality and religion are not the same thing. Someone may be spiritual, but not religious. And someone may be religious and not spiritual. And someone could be religious and spiritual. Spirituality goes beyond the ego. It connects to your greater purpose in life and connection to all of life. So on your page with your 5 energy drainers, what I want you to do next is beside each of them, there's a small box. I want you to write or type the initials of any of the 4 domains that you feel are being impacted by that particular drainer. So if one of your drainers affects you emotionally, mentally, and physically, write EMP. And if emotional is the dominant domain, either circle it or capitalize it, something to distinguish it from the other letters. After you do that with your energy drainers, go through and do the exact same thing with your energy renewers. So up until this point, what you should have done is listed your top 5 energy drainers, your top 5 energy renewers, and become comfortable with identifying which domains of resilience they impact in your life. Put that in the box beside of it and identify which domains it's impacting the most. It could be 1 or it could be 2. Typically, those are going to be your primaries. All right, so now what I would like for you to do is select just one of your 5 identified energy drainers. And this is the one that you're going to focus on for the rest of this session. So read through what you have, select the one that you want to focus on, and put a check in the box beside of it. All right, it may have an X in the PDF, but I want you to identify it. So put that in the very tiny box beside of it. Now, here is where things are going to get interesting. We're going to dissect this one drainer until it takes on a whole new form. Most everything that we identify as our problems in life are not the problem at all, but a hologram of the problem, meaning the problems we face are rarely visible. It's the symptoms that are visible. And what do we typically treat? What is visible or invisible? The visible, yeah. So before I introduce another important element, let's first break down our energy drainer, the one that you've selected. And there are a number of different ways that we can do this, but I'm going to use one example for this session, and that is using the 5 whys exercise. And if you've never heard of the 5 whys before, it's exactly what it sounds like. You ask yourself why 5 times, and typically by the 5th why, you get to the heart of the issue. So I'm going to start with an example, and I'm going to use traffic as my energy drainer. So what I'm going to do is ask myself, or I would ask someone else, why 5 times to drill down to the issue. And when you ask the next why, usually you incorporate the answer that came prior to that. So here's an example. Why is traffic your energy drainer? And that's how I would ask it if I was coaching someone. If somebody said, traffic is my energy drainer, I would say, why is traffic your energy drainer? And they may say, because I get anxious and irritated with other drivers. Now, the second why do you become anxious and irritated with other drivers? Their response could be, because they are terrible drivers. They cut me off and they weave in and out of traffic. Third why does them cutting you off and weaving in and out of traffic bother you? Seems like a dumb question to ask, right? Well, it should be apparent, but just wait for it. So their response could be, because they could cause an accident and either make me late for work or put my life or someone else's at risk. Fourth why are you worried about being late for work or in an accident? Because I don't want to deal with the consequences of being late, and I want to ensure I'm physically okay and able to provide for myself and my family and live a long, healthy life. That was the answer to the 4th why. Now here we get to the 5th why. So why is traffic an energy drainer? Because I fear what could happen. Fear. That is the invisible source of this energy drain. Originally, we want to say that it's traffic that is the source of the energy drain, but it's not the traffic. It is the fear of what could happen in the traffic. Yes? Okay. So take some time, pause this video, and work through your own whys, your 5 whys for that energy drainer that you chose. If it is challenging for you to do this exercise, that is perfectly normal and okay. Even to this day, sometimes I get stuck doing this exercise. The point is that you try to drill down to the source of the issue as best as possible. And the more you develop your awareness, the easier this exercise will become. So don't get frustrated with yourself if you find it challenging. This is a challenging exercise for many people. One key thing that I want to point out is that behind all of our energy drainers, impulsive reactions, and strong emotions, there are unmet needs and core emotions which need to be addressed. If you noticed, the answer to the first why I mentioned anxiousness and irritation, which are both emotions, but they weren't the core emotion. The core emotion was fear. And the need behind that emotion was to feel safe, secure, and able. So the purpose behind this 5 why exercise is it helps us to identify the source behind our problems and energy drainers, which is the first major step in this process in resolving our energy and becoming more resilient. So now we need to figure out how we're going to address the emotion of fear and our need to feel safe, secure, and able. In this example, right? You may have completely different needs for your whys. So here's where I'm going to introduce the next element, which is understanding the self. The self isn't just you. And what I mean by this is that we have different parts that make up who we are. We have our physical body, we have our mind. Our mind is comprised of the ego. And then we have a deeper level of consciousness that taps into what I call our true self. Some people call it consciousness. Some people call it higher self. Some people call it the soul. It doesn't matter what label you put on it. It's a deeper part of ourselves that is connected to everything. It doesn't judge, it doesn't dwell, it doesn't live in the future or the past, it lives in the present. It is our essence of being. So, again, how you label it isn't important. What is important is understanding each part of ourselves and how they work together and the influence they have on how we feel and live our lives. Most of us would like to think that we are primarily driven by our true self. However, it's the ego that drives many of us. And when I say many of us, I'm talking like upwards of 98, 99% of us, and that includes myself. However, the more we develop our awareness of the ego, the less power it has over our actions and thoughts, because now we have brought this information into our conscious awareness. And that simple act of being aware allows us to rewire our brain to think and operate differently. And slowly but surely, we can start to hand the control over to our true self. Our ego will always be there, but we want to put it in the back seat. It's going to be a backseat driver. So why is this important? Because there's a reason that we have not solved our problems. It's not that we aren't able. It's not that we lack the necessary information. It's because our true self is currently the backseat driver of our lives. And when the ego is piloting our mind and body, almost everything we do will be geared towards a means to an end or to protect our identity, what we see as being ourself. But when we can identify the invisible problem and address it at its core, we begin to quiet the ego. And by doing that, the people problems that we face today, both individually and as a collective society, including lack of energy, impulse control, unpleasant emotions, concerns, human discord, all of that will begin to fade away. So we're going to go back to our exercise in just a moment. But first, it's important that we understand how to tell the difference between the ego and the true self. What do they look like? What do they need or want? So let's start with the ego. The ego is attached to our personal identity. that being our titles, labels, belief systems, and how we perceive the world, ourselves and others. Whereas our true self is the essence of our being. It doesn't identify, it doesn't live in the past or future, as I said before. It only lives in the present moment. It's a passive, non judgmental observer, and it just is. And that can be a very hard concept for us to grasp, especially if we've never experienced that feeling before. The feeling of no fear whatsoever, pure love, freedom, peace, and acceptance. From experience, I can tell you that it does exist, but my ego is so strong that I can only hold on to that for short periods of time at the moment, at least in its purest form. And for those of you who have children, you may have experienced this feeling before of connecting with the true self when you saw your child for the first time. Some people find their true self in the midst of tragedy or when faced with their own mortality. Things just become clear, and this unconditional love starts to present itself. And it's a beautiful feeling that all of us have access to. We just have to pull back the layers of the ego to get there. So here is how you can detect the ego versus the true self. The ego wants to be right, wants to be perfect, wants to feel pleasure, wants to be above all else. Do you notice anything that is common there? The ego wants. It is always searching. It is never satisfied. Once it's right about something, it wants to be right about something else, right? It's never satisfied. The true self is content, is confident, is accepting, and is one with all. Again, there's a commonality there, and that is the true self just is. But here's the thing. The ego also likes to mask itself as the true self by saying, I am content for now. I am confident when I feel superior. I'm accepting as long as it's right and good in my eyes, right? I am one with all if they're all with me. So here's another form of commonality we see here. The ego says, I am. The ego is what we identify as me. Who am I? I am. It separates us from everyone else. And it's very conditional in what it wants. I'm content for now. I'm confident when I feel superior. So it's not consistent. It is conditional. Another way we can tell when the ego is control is because every time the ego gets a hold of something, it morphs it to push our own agenda or uses something or someone as a means to an end. One thing that I think of is organizations. Organizations primarily care about their bottom line. Now, I know every organization isn't like that. Some really genuinely care about their people. But at the end of the day, a business is a business because they want to make money. And so oftentimes they can get trapped in that egoic mind saying, how is this going to impact my bottom line? So they use tools like emotional intelligence as a means to an end instead of for the greater good. So let's now go back and tie this into our energy and emotional resilience. So below your 5 whys, I want you to reflect on that drainer that you chose and identify where the ego is present. This could be the feelings, thoughts, or reactions that revolve around that drainer or trigger. So again, I'm going to use the traffic example to kind of help you work through this. So what I noticed were my feelings of anxiousness and irritation. And my thoughts associated with those feelings are, am I safe? And for irritation, it's almost like, how dare you do that to me, right? That is the ego. How dare you cut me off. You're doing that to me. And that is a judgment statement, not an observation, because my concerns are primarily for myself and my comfort, right? It's not, oh, they just cut in front of me. That is an observation. The thing is, the ego says, I want to get to work on time. I don't want to have to deal with getting into an accident. I don't want to worry about being able to care for myself and my family. I. Whereas if my true self was driving my experience, first, it wouldn't have the concerns of the ego because it only lives in the present. In the present, I'm safe. In the present moment, I have nothing to worry about. If someone cuts in front of me, I see it, but that's it. I see what happens. It is the ego that reacts to the situation. So that said, the ego is not all bad. It has a purpose. But instead of letting it be the outlook for danger, if you've ever been on a ship, like think of the pirate ships and they have the post and the crow's nest up top, you have the person that's the outlook that looks for danger. That is their job. And then they yell out and alert the captain so the captain can steer the ship. But the captain is in control of the ship. Unfortunately, we tend to do the reverse. We're allowing our ego that should be in the crow's nest looking for danger to guide the ship and sail our lives and who we are. So take a moment and see where you can identify the ego being in control of how you view your drainer and how it is causing that energy drain, and in which domains it resides in. So take a moment and go through that exercise. You're going to be doing this in the right side, the right box. So you're going to write your energy drainer there that you selected, and that is where you're going to expand upon that one energy drainer in that right quadrant. Before you actually pause this video to do the exercise, let's also look at how the ego and the true self presents itself in each of these domains. I will go ahead and tell you that if it is a drainer, it is going to be driven by the ego, not the true self. But here is how the ego and the true self makes itself known in each of the resilience domains. In the emotional domain, the ego asks, am I safe? It cares about being safe. That could be, and this is emotionally safe, right? The true self focuses on understanding and resolution. So the true self doesn't have judgment. It doesn't care about the I, who we identify with. It just cares about understanding and resolution. For the physical domain, the ego asks, am I able? Whereas the true self focuses on nourishment and care. For mental, the ego asks, am I competent? The true self focuses on curiosity and clarity. And for spiritual, the ego asks, am I valued? And the true self focuses on fulfillment and purpose. Now, as we talked about before, the ego can mask itself as the true self. So what it may think is nourishment and care may not be. For example, if you say, oh, well, I'm going to go shopping because that just makes me feel good. But that is not the true self. That is helping make the ego feel better. So take some time, go through this. Take as much time as you need, pause this video, and really identify the ego in your energy drainer and just do a complete analysis on that. Okay, so now let's hop down to energy renewers. Go down to your energy renewers. And there are many ways that we can renew our energy. Some are temporary and others are long lasting. There's nothing wrong with temporary renewers, as long as we aren't abusing them or relying on them to be the end all be all. Because again, you can go back to your resilience domains, as we talked before, how the ego can mask itself as the higher self or the truer self. For example, if you had a long and stressful day, sometimes it's just good to plop down on the couch with a cup of ice cream. But when that becomes routine and often, that isn't managing your emotions effectively or going to solve anything. It's really an avoidance of the problem that needs to be addressed. Now, when I've done this exercise before and I use the ice cream thing, well, they say, well, isn't that nourishment? It falls under the true self focuses on nourishment. Ice cream is not nourishment. It is high sugar. Sure, it has calories, which I guess you could argue is some form of nourishment, but it's not about being healthy. The true self wants to have a healthy body. It wants to put things that are high in vitamins and minerals and nutrients into your system, not loading it with sugar or fats that just release these endorphins in the body and make us feel good temporarily. So I do want to note the difference between genuine true nourishment and a fix, right? And ice cream is kind of that fix. When we do things like that, binge watch TV, eat a bowl of ice cream, have a bottle of wine or a glass of wine or whatever it may be to make us feel better in that moment, it's really an avoidance of the problem that actually needs to be addressed. So when we think about energy renewers, ideally we're going to be serving both the ego and the true self because the ego is the one that needs that relief from that discomfort and strain. And when we are living in the state of the ego and we've been living in that state for so long, it's hard to just break away from that and live with our higher true self. So we're going to have to serve the ego too, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that serves our true self as well, not just as a means to an end when we're thinking of energy renewers. So here are some exercises that work for both. They help the ego and the true self. And the more that you do these, the more you're going to be relying on your true self to guide you versus your ego. So let's go over some of these together. And all of these you can find in the document that I've provided you. Breathing exercises work wonderfully because they work to regulate our sympathetic nervous system. And we're able to address the needs behind that energy drain once we're able to get our heart rate down and we're able to think and get out of that emotional state of stress. So, one of the breathing exercises you can do is a 5 by 5 by 5, meaning you breathe in for 5 seconds, inhale through the nose, hold for 5, and then breathe out through the mouth or the nose for 5 seconds. And you want to do this until you feel your heart rate lower, until you kind of feel that stress lift a bit. This could take a few minutes. I've done it up to 45 minutes. And when I tell you, it was an amazing feeling. I felt as light as a feather. Literally, I felt like if I could step on a scale, I could weigh no more than a pound or two. Breathing exercises are so beneficial for your health, for your stress, for everything. I think there's a book called Breathe. Haven't read it, but I've heard it's good. Okay. Some other techniques. The heart math quick coherence technique. So I am a certified heart math trainer, and this is one of the steps that I take people through the quick coherence technique. It's 2 steps. And step 1 is you focus your attention in the area of the heart. You imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. And while you're doing this, while you're focusing your attention on the heart, also inhale for that 5 and exhale for 5. So you're incorporating the breathing technique with this exercise. And as you continue to breathe with your attention focused on the heart, you move on to step 2, and that is you're going to make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. The purpose behind this is when we are in that state of gratitude, appreciation, love, and care, we cannot be in the state of the ego. They do not live in that same space. So we're detaching ourselves from the ego when we're in that state of appreciation, care, and love. And you can do this by thinking of a pet, a special place, a person in your life, things that you have. Again, gratitude is a great way to bring that positive feeling into the moment. And again, you're going to do this exercise until you feel that release of that stressor. Here are some other quick tricks to boost your mood. Smiling, because smiling releases neurotransmitters in the brain that make you feel good. Simply smiling. I would recommend doing it for at least a minute. And if faking your happiness through a forced smile makes you feel a little uncomfortable, you can also try watching a short and cheerful, humorous video. The Dodo is one of my favorite resources for cheerful and not necessarily humorous videos, but just people caring for other people, right? You can also watch funny videos if you want. Take a brisk walk, dance, go outside, sing or listen to an upbeat song. So, all of these exercises help us to get out of that stress state. However, they will not resolve the core issues. And that is what is so important, that while we can do these things to renew our energy, like breathing, like smiling, like watching a cheerful video, we also need to go back to that situation and use things like the 5 whys to address and drill down to the source of our issues so that we can resolve that. And that is when we start to renew our energy and become more resilient. Think of it this way: you have a bucket that has holes in it, and you fill the bucket with water. You want to fill your bucket. But as you're filling your bucket, the water is leaking out of those holes. So you have 2 options, right? You can continue just to pour that water in the bucket as it still drains, or you can plug the holes. And the way I think about that is when you plug those holes, that is when you're resolving the issues at their core. But continuing to dump water into the bucket is simply doing those things that renew your energy temporarily, that help the ego. They're a quick fix, I guess you could say, versus taking the time and effort to actually plug every hole, to identify it, to understand where is this leak coming from. So this is, again, just a very short segment of a much larger workshop that I typically do. If you enjoyed this, if you would like to learn more, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find my contact information in the description of this video. I do workshops for organizations, for schools. I also do personal one-on-one coaching and consulting. So if you feel like this resonates and would be helpful for your organization, or you want to take a deeper dive personally, feel free to reach out for a free consultation. I am happy to speak with you.